go to the Utopia where Roger would have a book on Leonardo da Vinci sitting beside a book on Barbie doll. So it was nice. It was a living art happening.
It was probably the only restaurant in the world where you get bacon and eggs and a fresh painting to go and be out of there in 15 minutes.
Here is a Chinese restaurateur who creates art in a portion of the restaurant. The clients also assisted him in developing the kind of art he created because they would say something, and from that it would spark.
I like to borrow a quote from D.H. Lawrence. He talked about Paris as a movable feast, and that's how I think of Utopia Café.
His restaurant's name is Utopia Restaurant. I said, how come you make that name? He didn't answer to me, but he seems to want to achieve the harmony between his art and his hamburger.
It used to be something that people would take their friends to see as soon as they came into town. They said, let's go have a coffee that tastes a bit like paint.
He was funny. He had a really wonderful sense of humor.
He's a mutation. He hasn't got the average mentality. He's got more than the average.
I think I became aware of Roger's aura, if you want to call it as such, probably sometime in the 80s. There was this eccentric artist who was doing things in a restaurant, very unusual kinds of art practice. So it was interesting in that sense, but probably even more interesting was that the individual artist, Roger, was a Chinese artist creating art that was so wild.
Oh, yeah. This part I just bring with me. That's nice. Nice, yeah?
So when you had that background in art, what kind of art would you say that you were making in China? Was it traditional China painting?
Yeah, most. But I never see Western art before.
He has a Chinese background on his art. He showed me his calligraphy, showed me his brush painting in ink on rice paper. It's beautiful traditional Chinese style.
Once he got here, he felt quite excited with the New World, and he didn't want to get stuck in that traditional Oriental rut and just knock off Chinese calligraphy ad nauseum. What he liked about the Expressionists was that gestural thing, especially look at Franz Klein. Those big black strokes were very calligraphy looking, and I'm sure some of those Expressionists were influenced by Chinese calligraphy, perhaps.
Studied art, who did you like in the way of art? What kind of artist did you like?
I go to Vincent Van Gogh now.
Okay, why do you like Vincent van Gogh?
Because he did it real fast.
Oh, you like the... When Roger talks about his art, he often talks about the quickness of the brush. That kind of quickness of the brush that you see in his art actually comes from his early training when he was a brush painter in China.
At that point, he decided to do something called Chinese Expressionism. He had this notion that he was going to separate and bring back his calligraphy work and have it side by side with the Expressionist work, or the modern work. He had the Chinese calligraphy style of work. Then he collaged that onto a board. On the other half of the board, he would splash in enamel paint and collage in that sort of expressionist kind of style. But eventually it just grew together, and it just became Rogerism.
I can't describe his style, but if I think long enough, my mind is so boggled down with Western history that I haven't got the categories to describe freedom. It's very mimetic But he doesn't leave anything the way it was when he saw it. He doesn't copy. He takes something, and on top of that, he invents.
I see Roger's work, or Roger as an artist, maybe using two very prominent male American artists, Jackson Pollock
Maybe Jackson Pollock.
and Andy Warhol,
Andy Warhol.
and bringing them together and putting his own spin on things.
Okay? You close. Right. Andy Warhol. Okay. Put it tomorrow ready.
This is more as Jackson Pollock. Beautiful body. You see how well he could draw, though, eh? Just beautiful lines. Just very uninhibited, you know. He seems to be able to go back into the mind of his inner child.
Many people like your art because it's not like the ordinary abstract art.
I make a funny.
Do you think that's you make it what?
Funny.
Is the humor that you have in your art something unique to you?
Yeah.
I don't think you would ever find that kind of humor, that kind of chance, that kind of edginess in a Chinese kind of painting. He uses a kind of humor that's very much associated with what is historically known as Dada art. Art of the 1920s, the way he sort of picks things up from wherever to say it becomes a work of art is very much a Dada kind of anti-art.
There was a lot of humor all the time too. He never took it too serious. I mean, he did, but he wasn't precious about the art. You know, no kid gloves or anything like that. So you got this hamburger here with these ballerina legs coming out of the bottom piece. Right? Like he didn't worry about the fact it didn't fit in, or that these legs were lesser compulsive artists have to white it out and paint over top. Right? And so you have a walking burger.
Roger creates art, I think, from gut reaction. He is not someone who thinks about something and does a study, does a sketch, etc., and then creates the work of art. More importantly, what happens is that he, like an abstract expressionist painter, like a Chinese painter, he has a surface, he puts a mark on it, and from that mark, he then begins to sort of improvise on that mark.
No, you can make two.
Would you do this to make it a work of art?
Or sometimes you can make sculpture, squeeze, or whatever.
Would you?
Something like. Okay? Thank you.
To him, the process is not something that you think about, but rather it's something that happens. It's a chance kind of situation. It comes from the interior of his being rather than the intellectual aspect of his mind.
He's prepared to look at anything. It's an example of courage in the face of the difficulty that everybody in the world has coping with things. He just does it. I admire him very much.
I love the chaos, or the ordered chaos in the work, and it's very hard to get that. I mean, some people who aren't educated in art might think, oh, it's childlike, and anyone could just splash this paint around, but you can't do that. It takes a lot of control to have that much chaos.
What I like about Roger's art is, I'd have to first say, the playfulness of it. Just a joyful playfulness that he would just paint right up the frames. Fingerprints, well, they were part of the artwork.
Roger was a strong influence, not directly with a painting style necessarily, but more of an attitude, I think, that brought the fun back into art.
I used to go there for breakfast at 6 in the morning in the 60s and 70s. And he would have lots of art magazines and stuff lying around in a big chaos, and books and all kinds of things. And we didn't communicate that well in language, which was a relief, because language doesn't do much for a lot of things.
It is like a constant house party. You know, you could go and visit your friends. You'd see your friends across the way, so you talk to them, and then some other friends would come in with people that you hadn't met, and you're pretty sure it's going to be somebody you're interested in talking to, so perpetual house party.
He never knew what to expect. And he didn't try to convince anybody. He would demonstrate it. It's a Zen type of teaching, confrontation, rather than persuasion. He didn't try to persuade.
I started hearing rumors about Roger from Jack Severson way back. I don't know if it was the early 80s or something. And eventually I was curious enough to stop in this cafe called the New Utopia. Jack introduced us, and we took pictures together, and I bought some of his pictures, and I even bought one that I couldn't fit in the car, so I had to leave it there. The next time I went to pick it up, Roger had sold it. So he gave me another one.
There was people that made $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
And there was people that made $200 a year.
Yeah.
And they all got the same service.
There was a number of occasions where, people would come in here and, I don't know, they just looked down and out, and, he would help them out.
When I would bring my students, we'd sit at a long table, a booth, and Roger would start bringing art books to the table. Art books and also scrapbooks that he had, where he'd cut out clippings. And it would end up that there'd be so many things on the table, besides the food, there'd be stacks of books. I mean, so it was a very, it was a very sort of an academic situation, but yet in a restaurant. It was sort of reminiscent of what the cafes might have been like in Paris, in the 30s.
Roger outside of Utopia. That's where the mystery, I think, really begins.
It seemed like Roger was in two different worlds. Certainly his home life was separate from the restaurant. And I think there was definitely an old school or traditional cultural kind of separation. Wife is head of the domestic scene, and he's in charge of the workplace, which was the cafe.
Oh, I know Roger over 40 years. His dad partner with my dad work in an old rock cafe. We work at the same place.
Does wife understand his art, do you know?
No.
Does she
Not
like
too
it,
much.
like what he did there?
People, he gave it to some people. He said, "Oh no, I don't want it." Don't understand what he do. Kind of new picture,
What does your family think of your exciting kind of art?
They don't care. I make a sculpture my father threw away in the garbage one time. I made a sculpture and my butt.
How did you feel about that?
Some funny.
You thought your father was a little bit funny. Maybe he didn't like your art?
I don't know. He said, maybe he think I'm crazy.
Do you think
I don't know. I think we.
You think he's crazy? Do you think you're crazy?
I think so. That's why he take my sculpture thrown in the outside.
When Roger was talking about his father throwing out a concrete sculpture, I think I understand it very well because, again, here is a young artist trying to sort of make it in North America. His father, however, being very traditional, coming from a very agrarian farm background, would see art as totally unusual. It's not something that my son would do. And that's probably why his wife and his children are not sort of enthralled with him being an artist, because it's not part of Chinese culture.
Well, the Utopia was, by the mid-'80s, was as much his studio as it was a restaurant. The art sort of infringed upon the cafeteria part.
You've heard that where they say you get to be famous 10 minutes out of your life or 15 minutes. Well, it always made everyone feel special going in there. Made everyone sitting in there feel that it was their famous time.
We're at the Utopia Café once again. We were here a while ago. We did a piece on the place and its owner, Roger, and actually the inventor of Rogerism. But we decided that one piece really was not enough, and that in order to get to the meat of the place, what we consider to be one of the most excellent places that closes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and has original art in the walls by its owner, it's the best in Canada. And hi, Raj.
The principles.
I don't know. I think it's maybe that way. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. What is it about his stuff that you like so much? Because I've been buying it myself, you know, and I'm not quite sure why.
He's pure as a driven snow. He can't be affected, right?
Roger would entertain his art community because he had a following. People would go there to have, dare I say, not a great meal, but more importantly to have this wonderful conversation and to be stimulated by his sense of freedom.
When John Cougar Mellencamp came and he wouldn't believe he was famous because he didn't like the guy he came with. The guy says, John Cougar Mellencamp. He says, so? He says, he's famous, Roger. He's a famous singer. He says, probably not as famous as Joe Fafard.
Heavy metal.
It was the artist, but it was also the Roger experience.
Say hi, Dave. Hi, Roger.
Nice to meet you.
You go there and you talk to Roger,
Hey, how you doing?
and it's entertaining. You're going there to meet other people and become awash in that art environment.
Last July, the Board of Health closed down Regina's new Utopia Café. Its proprietor, Roger Ng, thought about cleaning the place up and reopening, but in the end he decided to sell. And that decision brought a 23-year institution to an end.
Nobody ate there anyway. I mean, I don't see what they were.
That wasn't the
about.
point of it.
No, they shut down like the most important cultural place in the city because they didn't understand it.
Did you find that it changed a lot after that?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There was no life there anymore. In the first months after the cafe closed down, he would get up early in the morning and get in his car and drive around. And his car eventually filled up with a lot of garbage, styrofoam cups and things and wrappers. And Jack was saying that there was artwork all over those wrappers and styrofoam cups, and I found that to be so beautiful. But
and sad at the same time.
And sad at the same time.
It was part of your life, and part of this little coffee group.
Yeah.
We probably tried 10, 15 different places, and it was just hard to duplicate that atmosphere.
I miss the Utopia restaurant because that's the only one restaurant in Regina. They combine art and hamburger and coffee. Maybe that's his utopia he wants to achieve. I really miss that utopia.
I remember when the restaurant was closed down, 92 or 3, that he, for some reason, he was painting portraits of Jesus at that time. And there again, I don't think it was irreverent or reverent, or he was just another character that deserved to be painted.
There's definitely themes that he would work with in subject matter, like tigers, guitars, corporate symbols.
The themes often had to do with things that were happening. So when the Blue Jays played at Taylor Field, he did Blue Jay paintings. When the Riders were playing, he painted Rough Rider paintings. I think it was a commercial thing that people who went to the game would buy this. Or when Agribition was in town, he did cowboy paintings, thinking these cowboys would buy. And they did too.
Halloween.
Oh, Halloween, yeah, it was great. He did lots of Frankensteins and such.
Roger has never been really exhibited in a major local, provincial, national gallery. probably because his work is really quite on the edge, and because he was, in point of fact, playing cultures against one another. He was doing cross-cultural work. It's not until recently that cross-cultural art practice is somewhat acceptable, or understood, acknowledged, shown.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The Mona Lisa is wonderful.
See my art? Oh, that's good painting.
I've only been in Regina for about a year and a half, and I've heard a lot about Roger from the periphery, you know, because of the cafe. But I've never seen any of his work. It's quite amazing to walk in fresh and to see the range of the work.
You can talk about him as an artist and his work in terms of outsider art, or in terms of naive art, but particularly how the restaurant has established and sustained his career outside of the art establishment.
Great show here.
Yeah.
I found that what he did seemed to almost fulfill a role that in some ways art galleries haven't. When I think of how he decided, you know, how he was able to choreograph and spark discussion and inform people and be a meeting place, he was very successful.
Wow. And what would possess somebody to take a Monopoly board? Reminds me of the Warhol. It is. That's what, see, I got it. I didn't even read the label. And that whole pop culture thing of taking everyday pop stuff and making art out of it. This is quite wonderful.
Here, Roger, your sunglasses, you want to try them on? These are yours. Try them on, try those on. Now, actually, that's the godfather of art look right there.
I think it's really quite unique. I'm not talking about quality, good or bad. I'm talking about the freedom of expression, that sense of being able to express whatever he wanted on whatever he wants. I think is really very, very something to be cherished.
Often, this kind of challenge puts people off because they don't want to pay attention to it. It threatens them. They can't categorize it. Can't put it in a pigeonhole. That's what I like about it.
Yeah.
Because the art world needs that every once in a while.
I really enjoy the work, and whether or not anybody else appreciates it, I still enjoy the work and seeing it being done and being a part of that little scene at the cafe.
It's when I'm an old man in the rocking chair in the old folks' home, you know, it'd be very nice to have a few of the other people from Utopia sitting alongside there, because we'd probably spend many hours talking about that, just reliving those stories. There's a million stories around Roger.
Well, he's definitely become a legend, and it was just a great time in history.